So this is the second video where we're introducing a specific type of trapezoid. First we talked about a regular trapezoid. In order to be a trapezoid, you have to have one pair of opposite sides that are parallel. I accidentally wrote a T. Not parallel. Sorry about that. Parallel. Alright, in order to have one pair of parallel sides, the bases are parallel. That makes you a trapezoid. Then if you are an isosceles trapezoid, you have to have all of these extra conditions met. So not only do you have one pair of parallel sides that are bases, just one pair of parallel sides, you also have to have diagonals that are congruent or equal to each other. Congruent diagonals. They're equal. Okay? And the diagonals of a shape are going to be the ones that connect opposite angles to each other. So they go across, bottom to top, bottom to top. Now they are equal to each other. They are congruent. Okay? That means that, and this part is congruent to this part. This part is congruent to this part. Okay? Additionally, the non-parallel sides, or the legs, are also congruent or equal. So, to be an isosceles trapezoid, you have to have diagonals that are congruent, and the legs, the sides that are not the bases, are also congruent. These are our legs. Leg, and these are our bases. Base. Okay. The other thing to be aware of is that opposite angles are supplementary. Supplementary, which means that they add up to, or sum to 180. Okay? So one of my bottom base angles plus one of my top base angles would add up to 180. And a circle and an arc, one of each of the opposites, would add up to 180. Also, for an isosceles trapezoid, each of the base angles are congruent. So the bottom angles along the bottom base are congruent, and the top angles along the top base are congruent. They are equal to each other. Okay? So those are all the things that you have to have in order to be an isosceles trapezoid. All the properties that you must satisfy. One pair of opposite sides that are parallel, and that's true of any trapezoid. Okay? Consecutive non-base angles are supplementary. So this one plus this one adds up to 180 for all trapezoids. And then diagonals that are congruent for an isosceles trapezoid. The legs that are congruent for isosceles. Opposite angles that are supplementary, and base angles congruent. These are for isosceles specific. Okay, let's use some of those properties to solve for missing parts of an isosceles trapezoid. Okay, now we know that this is isosceles and a trapezoid because of two things. We know it's a trapezoid because it has one pair. Even though there's two triangles, that makes one pair, like two shoes make one pair of shoes. So this is our base, and this is our other base, right? So we have two bases, and the part that tells us that it's an isosceles trapezoid is that the legs, or the sides that connect the bases, are congruent. So we're going to draw a line separating our sides. And we're going to go ahead and calculate the parts that it's looking for. So first it's asking us to find W. All right, where's W? Here's the measure of angle W. Now something that we know about isosceles trapezoids is that base angles are congruent. Okay, my base angles are congruent. That means that this angle is going to be equal to or congruent to this angle. So if this angle is 47, this angle has to be 47. 47. Okay? Now I need angle Y. Okay? angle Y is at the bottom, and we know that one top base angle and one bottom base angle together make 180 degrees. So I'm going to subtract 180 minus 47, and that is going to give me the measure of angle Y, which is 133 degrees. Okay? So this one is 133 degrees, and since base angles have to be congruent, this one will also be 133 degrees. Okay? Why don't you go ahead and give a try to this problem right below there. Pause the video and I'll check in with you in a minute. So we were able to identify that this was isosceles because it has two congruent legs and one pair of opposite sides that are parallel. Since it's isosceles, we were given this angle of 112 for P. That means the other base angle on the same line along the same base also needs to be congruent and 112. From there, we can figure out the measure of angle R, because one angle at the top and one angle at the bottom, consecutive base angles, are supplementary. So 180 minus 112 gives us 68. It's supplement pair. And if this one is 68, I wrote 66, but they have to match. If this one's 68, then this one needs to be 68 degrees. They are congruent. Okay? All right, so let's look at how we would set up and solve for the next problem where it's an isosceles trapezoid. It says isosceles, so even though it didn't mark these sides as being congruent, I can go ahead and mark them since it used the words isosceles. I'm also probably going to go ahead and draw some markings in. I'm going to divide this in half. I'll mark this base angle pair as being congruent, and I'll also mark this base angle pair at the bottom as being congruent. Okay? It didn't give me any other information except for that this one and this one in terms of x. Now, what do we know about these? Well, as you can see, we know that the base angles are congruent. That means that they're equal. Whenever we use the word congruent, we mean equal. So I can set these equal to each other. I can say that 2x plus 27, this angle, equals 5x minus 12. They have to be equal to each other. When I solve, I bring my 12 or my 27 over here. It doesn't really matter. Probably easier to bring the 12 over there, giving me 39. And then my 2x, I bring it over here and subtract, and that is going to give me 3x. And when we divide by 3 on both sides, we get that x is equal to 13. Okay? So x being equal to 13 does not actually give us a measure of an angle, though. In order to figure out one of the angles, I need to take this value of x and substitute it back in for one of these angle pairs. Why don't we substitute it back in for 2x plus 27? Where the x used to be, now that I know what x is 13, I say 2 times x, or 2 times 13, plus 27. Okay, so 2 times 13 is 26. 26 plus 27 is going to give me 53 degrees. And if this angle is 53, then its base angle is congruent. It's also equal to 53. From here, I can figure out angles A and B by taking 53 and subtracting that from 180. These two together have to equal 180, so 180 minus 53 gives me 127. And if A is 127, B has to be 127 as well. So that leaves us with 127 for the two top base angles, A and B, and 53 for the base angles at the bottom, C and D. Okay. let's take a moment and look at how we would solve a couple of other problems. Okay, so here we're looking at a pair of angles along the bottom, and they are congruent. Let's check out how we would set up and solve for angles along a different set. Okay. Now I'm going to set these up. That's the part that I'm interested in. You can put them into Desmos to solve. I'm not going to go through the solving with you. If you need help with that, let us know. Okay? So as soon as I know that it is isosceles for my trapezoid, I'm going to put in some extra markings. I know these sides are congruent. I usually draw a line through my base, and I'm going to mark this angle as being equal to this angle, and this angle as being equal to this angle. I also know that one blue angle and one red angle are always equal to 180. If last time we had two blue angles, two of the same color are equal to each other. So here I've got one blue, this one is blue, and I have one red. They're not equal, they're different from each other, one on the bottom base and one on the top. What I do know is that one blue and one red equal 180. So to set this one up to solve for x, I would say that I have 4x plus 17, and I'm going to add that to my angle of 10x minus 33. That has to be equal to 180. So they are supplementary to each other. When I put this together to solve, I get that x is equal to 14. I can substitute that in to both of these angles. 10 times 14 minus 33. And that's going to give me 107. If this one's 107, then this one also has to be 107. And also substitute in from down here, or if I wanted to, I can subtract from 180. 180 minus 107 is going to leave me with 73. And if one of them is 73, the other is 73. So let's set up and see if we can figure out how to solve this one as well. Alright, so we know again it's an isosceles trapezoid. That means our legs are congruent. It also means that these base angles will be equal to each other, and these top base angles will be equal to each other. Oops, I accidentally did them the other way around. I've been doing red on top and blue on the bottom. Let me be consistent for you. Okay, red, red, and blue, blue. So if you notice here, we have one red one and one blue one. We know that one red one and one blue one add up to 180 degrees. So I can say that 11x minus 16, opposite angles are supplementary, plus 5x plus 4 have to be equal to 180. When I solve this, I go through and I solve, and I get x is equal to 12. Okay. I can then substitute that back in, and if I want to find the measure of angle P, I need to find its matching measure. So I would need to substitute into S 5 times 12 plus 4, which is giving me 64. Okay. The last thing that we need to go over very briefly here is how to solve using diagonals. So we know that the diagonals are congruent, and we know that the bottom part of the diagonal is congruent to the bottom part of the diagonal. Okay? So I know, for example, that this entire length is going to be equal to this entire length. I also know that if this part is 8, then this small part on the opposite side is also going to be 8. If this longer part on the bottom is 14, then its opposite part on the bottom is also 14. So I know, for example, that CO also has to be 8. And I know that NP, an entire length, has to be 8 plus 14. The entire length, n to p, is 8 and 14 together, which is 22. OP is on this side, and since it's an isosceles trapezoid, we can mark our sides as congruent. This part is congruent to this part. If this side is 11, this side has to also be 11. The legs must be congruent. We can apply this in terms of an equation to solve in terms of x, or by solving for a missing side. At this point, you should work on problems 1 through 13 around the room and record your answers to turn in for the end of class. If you have any questions, refer to your notes. There are not more than 13 questions, so don't worry about that. Thanks so much. Goodbye.